Usually when we talk about legal documents, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Right, like engineering or something.
Yeah, exactly, like medicine. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is, it's binary.
Broken or not broken.
Right. And we tend to think of contracts the exact same way. You have a stack of papers, you sign on the dotted line, and boom, the paper is the x-ray.
It's a comforting thought, honestly, but the reality of human interaction makes that absolute precision incredibly elusive.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Which is exactly why we are taking a deep dive today into a massive stack of Philippine legal review materials, Supreme Court jurisprudence, and some very specific CPA board exam notes focusing on contract law.
It's a heavy stack today.
It really is. So our mission for you listening, because you are our student for today, is to master the fascinating tension between what people actually intend to do and what, finally gets put on paper.
Right. We're looking at that friction between the form of a contract and the equitable remedy of reformation.
Basically, when is a handshake enough? And when will a typo completely ruin your life?
That tension right there is the core of so much litigation. Because to truly grasp Philippine contract law, you have to understand the underlying philosophy.
Okay, set the stage for us.
Well, we're dealing with a hybrid legal system here. The Civil Code is heavily influenced by the Spanish system, which operates on what is called the spiritual system.
The spiritual system. I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds more like theology than jurisprudence.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, like as a student of law, I know the baseline rule. An oral contract is generally valid, but tying it to a spiritual philosophy is, it's an interesting angle.
Well, the term reflects what the law actually values. It values the spirit or, the true intent of the parties over strict, rigid formalities.
Got it.
As long as you have the essential requisites, which are consent, an object certain, and a cause or consideration, the contract is obligatory.
In whatever form it takes.
Exactly. The meeting of the minds is the sacred element here. Article 1356 lays this out as the general rule.
Right, but I always hit a wall when thinking about how this plays out in an actual courtroom.
How so?
Well, a meeting of the minds is invisible, right? If two people agree verbally, that feels like paying for an expensive TV in cash without asking the store for a receipt.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
The transaction is 100% valid. The money changed hands. You own the TV. But if you need to enforce a warranty later, you have zero structural proof to force the store to honor it.
That is a brilliant mechanical way to look at it, and it highlights the crucial distinction you absolutely must make when tackling these board exam questions.
Which,
The difference between a contract's validity and the evidence needed to prove it.
okay.
The law acknowledges that the handshake deal is a valid reality, but proving that invisible reality to a judge, that burden falls entirely on you.
And I imagine lower courts just hate dealing with that burden.
Oh, they despise it.
Let's look at the jurisprudence in our stack. The Dodin Hernaiz versus De Los Angeles case.
A classic.
Yeah. Marlene Dodin was a massive movie star in the Philippines, and she was suing a production company for unpaid compensation for her acting services.
And there was no written contract.
Right. Zero paperwork. So I'm
Right.
guessing the lower court just threw the case out because evaluating an oral claim for professional services is a massive logistical headache.
Exactly what happened. The judge essentially took the easy way out.
Yeah.
He ruled that because her claim wasn't evidenced by a written document, it just couldn't be entertained.
But the Supreme Court stepped in and reversed that dismissal.
They did, because they had to protect that spiritual intent we talked about.
Right.
They pointed out a fundamental misunderstanding of the law by that lower court judge. They reiterated that an oral contract for personal services is perfectly valid and binding from the moment of perfection.
So the agreement existed the exact moment Marlene Dodin and the studio agreed she would act for a specific fee.
Yes, form was completely irrelevant to its existence.
Which brings us to the inevitable crash between that Spanish spiritual system and, well, human nature.
Yeah, because humans are messy.
Exactly. Because if everything is valid orally, society just descends into chaos. People lie. Memories fade.
Which is why the Philippine system also imported the Anglo-American statute of frauds.
Okay, so you've identified the exact philosophical collision there. The framers of the Civil Code knew the spiritual system was beautiful in theory,
Incredibly dangerous in practice.
Right, so they built a fence around it. And this is where we get to our first major hurdle for anyone taking their professional exams.
Let's call this CPA board exam trap note number 1.
I like that. Trap note number 1.
Form for validity. The law carves out rare, very specific cases where the physical paper isn't just proof of the contract. The paper is the contract.
Okay, wait. So if you fail to follow the required form here.
The contract doesn't just lack evidence. It is completely
sure.
void, dead on arrival.
Wow. So we're shifting from, like, the transaction is valid but hard to prove to the transaction never legally happened at all?
Precise.
What falls into that extreme category?
Well, real property donations are a classic trap. Donating a parcel of land must be executed in a public instrument.
Like a notarized document.
Exactly. If you write the donation on a napkin or promise it over dinner in front of 20 witnesses, the law views it as a void act.
It doesn't matter how many people heard it.
Nope. Another trap is donating personal property worth more than 5,000 pesos. The donation and the acceptance must both be in writing.
Because a car or land or a massive transfer of wealth is just, it's too significant an asset to leave to a he said, she said dispute.
Right.
The friction of the paperwork is a feature, not a bug. It forces the donor to pause, maybe sober up from their impulsive generosity, and truly commit.
That is exactly the psychological mechanism at play. The law is literally protecting you from yourself.
That makes sense.
And there's one more crucial validity trap I want to mention. Selling land through an agent. The authority of that agent to sell the land must be in writing.
Oh, so if I verbally authorize my cousin to sell my lot in the province?
And he finds a buyer and executes the sale. That sale is void.
Absolutely void.
Yeah.
That makes absolute sense. It shuts down any fraudulent claims of authority before they even start.
Exactly. Now let's contrast that with CPA board exam trap note number 2.
Okay.
Form for enforceability, which falls under that statute of frauds we mentioned. This is where the terminology really trips people up on exams.
It trips them up because the concepts are adjacent, but the legal outcomes are, like, vastly different.
Exactly. Under the statute of frauds, the oral contracts are entirely valid. All the essential elements are there.
Right.
But they are unenforceable in court unless they are in writing, or at least evidenced by some note or memorandum.
So going back to my analogy, the court acknowledges the TV was bought, but refuses to help you enforce the warranty because you didn't get the receipt.
Perfectly stated.
What specific scenarios trigger this?
The law targets agreements that are highly susceptible to memory decay or social pressure. For example, an agreement that by its terms is not to be performed within a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if we agree today that you'll paint my house exactly 2 years from now, it must be in writing. Who is going to accurately remember the intricate details of a verbal conversation 2 years down the line?
Right. Memory is incredibly malleable. You might remember agreeing to paint it white. I might remember agreeing to, like, a premium gloss white.
And neither of us is necessarily lying. We just remembered it differently.
Exactly.
Another scenario under the statute of frauds is a special promise to answer for the debt of another person. Guarantors.
Oh, that's a big one. People verbally agree to back a friend's debt in the heat of a social moment all the time. Like, don't worry, bank manager. If my buddy doesn't pay, I've got his back.
Happens every day.
Huh.
But when the friend defaults and the bank comes knocking, the reality of that financial burden hits.
Yeah.
If that promise wasn't in writing, the bank cannot sue the guarantor. The writing requirement forces a level of solemnity on taking on someone else's debt.
So to crystallize this for you listening, form for validity means if you don't follow the rule, the contract is a ghost. It never existed.
Yeah.
Form for enforceability means the contract is real, the mind's met, but if you end up in a dispute, the court will simply cross its arms and refuse to intervene because you failed to get it in writing.
A vital distinction. And I'll add one caveat examiners love.
What's that?
The statute of frauds only applies to executory contracts.
Meaning neither side has performed their obligation yet.
Exactly. If the contract has already been partially executed, say you already paid a down payment on the goods, the statute of frauds no longer applies and the oral agreement can be enforced.
Got it. Okay, let's layer in the final category of form, which I think is actually the most misunderstood. Form for convenience. Articles 1357 and 1358.
Oh.
This is where the law says certain contracts must appear in a public document, like a notarized deed for the sale of real property. But wait, if it doesn't affect validity and it doesn't affect enforceability between the two people.
What is the point?
Exactly, what's the point?
The point is the rest of the world. Non-compliance with this form doesn't invalidate the sale between the buyer and seller. But the public document is required for the convenience of the parties to bind third persons,
Third person's meaning.
like the government. You need that notarized deed to register the sale with the Registry of Deeds. The government needs a standard format to recognize your ownership.
Okay, let's use another analogy here. It's like buying a VIP ticket to a concert online. You click purchase, the money leaves your account, and the agency emails you a confirmation.
Right.
That transaction is valid and enforceable between you and the agency. The minds met.
The digital handshake is complete.
But to actually get past the bouncer at the stadium doors, the bouncer representing third parties or the government, you can't just wave a forwarded email. You need to compel the ticket booth to print your secure physical wristband.
I love that.
That wristband is the public document. You already own the right to the VIP section, but you need that specific physical form to make the rest of the world recognize it.
That captures the mechanics perfectly. And it really illustrates the power granted to contracting parties.
How so?
Because if an agreement is both valid and enforceable, meaning it doesn't violate the statute of frauds, but it just lacks that public document form, you aren't stuck.
Okay.
The law gives you the right to legally compel the other party to observe that form. That's Article 1357.
So if I buy land from you and we just write it on a piece of notebook paper, the sale is valid and enforceable.
Right.
But I can drag you to a notary public and force you to execute a proper deed of sale so I can register it.
Yes. And you can do this simultaneously with an action upon the contract.
Meaning?
You don't have to file one lawsuit to force the execution of the public document, wait years for that to finish, and then file another lawsuit to get the land. You file one case demanding both.
That is incredibly efficient. Okay, so up to this point, we've explored what happens when the form is missing or inadequate.
We have.
But what happens when you go through all that trouble, you secure the paperwork, you sign it, and later realize the document itself is fundamentally flawed. It says the wrong thing.
That transitions us perfectly into Chapter 4.
Yeah.
The equitable remedy of reformation of instruments. We are moving from missing form to wrong form.
Wrong form.
Yes. This deals with the typos of the mind. Article 1359. The law provides this remedy when there has been a true meeting of the minds, but the written instrument fails to reflect that true intention due to mistake, fraud, inequitable conduct, or accident.
Now, a critical distinction here, and let's flag this for you listening, as CPA board exam trap note number 3, reformation versus annulment.
Oh, they love testing this.
Because asking a judge to fix a contract sounds a lot like asking a judge to kill a contract.
They're entirely different legal animals.
Mm.
In reformation, the contract exists, the minds met, the paper is just lying about what the minds agreed to.
Mm.
The remedy is to fix the paper to match reality. In annulment, the minds never met. The consent of one party was vitiated by fraud or a massive mistake regarding the object of the contract itself.
So the remedy there is to destroy the contract because a valid agreement never formed.
Exactly.
Let me test myself on this. Say I agree to sell you my farm. We negotiate and explicitly agree that I am keeping the farmhouse on the edge of the property.
Go.
But the typist drafts the deed and accidentally writes that the sale includes all improvements. We both know what we agreed to. The paper is just wrong. We ask the court for reformation to change the word includes to excludes.
You've got the mechanics down perfectly.
But if I was selling the land genuinely believing the farmhouse was excluded, and you were buying it genuinely believing the farmhouse was included,
Right.
we were never on the same page. There was no true agreement. You can't ask a judge to reform the document to match an agreement that never existed in the first place. That requires annulment.
That's the crux of it right there. The courts do not attempt to make a new contract for the parties under the guise of reformation. They only temper the strict rigor of the written word to prevent an injustice caused by, like, a clerical error or sneaky conduct.
So what are the specific grounds where a Philippine court will actually step in? I mean, they can't just do this because someone suffers buyer's remorse.
Far from it. The grounds are very specific. Articles 1361 to 1365. First is mutual mistake. Both parties must have made a mistake of fact, and it must cause the instrument to fail to express their intention.
Give me an example.
Like if both parties thought the property line ended at the old oak tree, but the surveyor's technical description in the deed extends it another 50 meters.
Okay, that's innocent enough. What if it's not innocent?
Then we look at unilateral mistake combined with fraud or inequitable conduct.
Oh, this sounds juicy.
It is. One party is mistaken in good faith about what the document says, but the other party knows the document is wrong and stays silent to take advantage.
So they basically lay a trap.
Exactly. Say a borrower agrees to a 5% interest rate. The predatory lender drafts the final contract to say 15%, buries it on page 20, and rushes the borrower to sign.
Ugh, terrible.
The borrower is mistaken, the lender is acting fraudulently.
Yeah.
The borrower can demand reformation to revert that text back to 5%.
Because it's about the document deviating from the agreed reality because someone is playing dirty.
Precisely.
What about our typist from my earlier example? Where does that fit?
The typist's error. Article 1364. This is when the mistake is due to ignorance, lack of skill, or negligence by the third party drafting the instrument.
So neither contracting party is acting in bad faith.
Right. And the benchmark jurisprudence for this is the Manila Engineering case.
Oh, I saw that in the notes. What happened there?
A typist was drafting the formal paperwork affirming a verbal contract for a massive construction project. But instead of hitting the $ key on the typewriter, the typist mistakenly used the peso sign.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In a massive infrastructure project, the exchange rate difference between dollars and pesos would fundamentally alter the entire valuation of the deal.
It was a catastrophic typo. But the court allowed the reformation of the document to replace the peso sign with the $ sign.
Really? Just like that.
Well, the court looked at the sheer scale of the project and deduced that no sane, responsible contractor would ever agree to build that specific project for that numerical amount in pesos.
Because it would guarantee bankruptcy.
Exactly. It was clearly a clerical slip, not the true intent.
That brings up a massive structural issue, though.
What's that?
If a party can just run to a judge and say, you know, the typist messed up or I didn't read page 20, doesn't that destroy the reliability of written contracts? Like, why bother writing it down? This is where the parole evidence rule comes in, right?
If you hit the nail on the head, the courts are hyper-aware of the danger of destabilizing written contracts.
They have to be.
The parole evidence rule presumes that a written agreement contains all the terms the parties agreed upon. It is the ultimate shield for the written word.
It's basically the court's way of saying, hey, if this specific detail was so vital to your deal, you should have made sure it was in the final document before you signed it.
Yes. And to overcome that shield,
Yeah.
to convince a judge to look past the paper and peer into that spiritual intent we talked about at the start,
You need proof.
you need an incredibly high standard of proof. You cannot just claim a mistake using a preponderance of evidence. You need clear and convincing evidence.
Like what?
Prior correspondence, drafts with handwritten notes, multiple witnesses to the negotiation. You have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the paper is a deviation from the actual meeting of the minds. The power to reform is exercised sparingly and with great caution.
So the paper is still king unless you can bring an absolute mountain of evidence proving it's wearing the wrong crown.
Well put.
But even with that mountain of evidence, aren't there situations where reformation is completely off the table?
Yes, and this brings us to our final CPA board exam trap note number 4. When reformation is strictly prohibited, Articles 1366 to 1369.
The absolute roadblocks.
The law builds absolute roadblocks. You cannot ask for reformation of a simple donation inter vivos where no condition is imposed.
Okay.
You cannot reform a will. You cannot reform a contract when the real agreement is entirely void. And you cannot ask for reformation if you've already brought an action to enforce the instrument.
Let's unpack that first one, the donation prohibition. Why can't you reform a simple donation? If I donate a sports car to you, but the deed accidentally says I donated my pickup truck, why can't I ask the court to fix it?
Think about the underlying nature of the act. A donation is purely gratuitous. It's an act of liberality.
It's a gift.
Right. If the donor made a mistake in the deed, it is simply a failure in a bounty that they were under no legal obligation to give in the first place.
Because I'm giving you something for free, you have no legal standing to complain about the paperwork. The done can't demand the court force the donor to fix a typo on a free gift.
The law will not compel someone to be generous correctly.
That is a great phrase. Okay, now what about that final prohibition? You cannot reform an instrument if you've already brought an action to enforce it.
That sounds like a classic application of estoppel.
Right. If I file a lawsuit demanding that you comply with the contract exactly as it is written, I am legally planting my flag and admitting that the written document expresses our true intent.
Yes, you've chosen your stance.
I can't lose that lawsuit, realize the contract is actually terrible for me, and then pivot to say, well, actually, let's reform it because the paper is full of typos.
Exactly. I chose my reality. I have to live with it.
A textbook explanation. You cannot have your cake and eat it too in the eyes of the court.
So true.
Well, this has been a fantastic unraveling of these concepts for our listener today.
It's a dense topic, but so crucial.
It really is. We started by exploring the Philippine system's spiritual roots, learning that the tree meeting of the minds is the beating heart of a contract. But we also saw how the statute of frauds and specific validity rules act as a necessary cage, right, to prevent human memory and fraud from tearing the system apart.
And we navigated that transition from missing form to flawed form, seeing how the equitable remedy of reformation saves parties from the typos of the mind.
Provided they have the clear and convincing evidence to overcome the parole evidence rule, of course.
Naturally.
It all comes back to that tension between intent and execution, which brings up a fascinating thought to end on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we spent this entire deep dive talking about human error, typists hitting the peso sign instead of the dollar sign, predators concealing clauses, movie actresses relying on handshakes.
The messy friction of human commerce.
Exactly. But look at the trajectory of technology right now. We are moving rapidly into an era where smart contracts are coded directly onto blockchains, executing automatically the second conditions are met.
Oh, wow. Yes.
We have AI drafting complex legal documents in seconds based on, like, incredibly vague prompts.
It's a complete paradigm shift in how intent is recorded.
So what happens to the meeting of the minds when the minds are mediated by an algorithm?
That's a great question.
If an AI hallucinates a liability clause that neither human intended, and it gets buried in page 50 of an auto-generated PDF, will the rigid, unfeeling code be the absolute law?
Or will our legal system's centuries-old Spanish-influenced equitable remedy of reformation still have the power to save us from the machine's mistakes?
Exactly. If the algorithm makes the typo, does the spiritual system still apply?
That is the frontier of contract law right there.
It really is. Something for you listening to mull over until our next deep dive.